And we are back with the fifth and the final segment of the GSMC Basketball Podcast, presented by the GSMC Sports Network. And in this final segment, I'm just going to give my predictions of what's going to happen, or what I think is going to happen, going into these final few games before the qualifying round ends up being played. Now, the quarterfinals is set to start on Tuesday, August 6th, and the final day of actual, just regular games, I guess you could say, is going to happen on Saturday. However, there is still one more game that's going to go down, and that's more like, I guess you could say, a fun game, because these two teams, France and Germany, they're going to end up playing against each other. They've already qualified, and there's really there's no need to be playing that game, but, we all like basketball, so we all really, really want to watch that game. And I think France, I believe they don't have as much NBA talent as the German team has, at least, like, if I remember correctly. Let me just go ahead and check. The German team, they have, actually, wait a minute, hold on. 1, 2, 3, 4, 6, 1, 2, 3, 4. Actually, the France team has more players in the NBA currently than the German team. So that's my bad for that misconception and that mistake. And they also have more players with NBA experience than they do the German team. Now, the German team, they have several players that have never played in the NBA. Meanwhile, the France team, they have Victor Wembanyama and Rudy Gobert, two top NBA players in the league in their respective categories, and the top two players in the Defensive Player of the Year voting. And whether you think Rudy Gobert should have won it, or whether you think Victor should have won it or not, doesn't matter. Having both of these two on the same team it's pretty broken, especially since Victor is so much taller than a lot of these other guards and these other forwards and basically every other center. Like, he's just better than a lot of them. And I feel like I'm pretty sure that France should make this a win. Like, they should be able to win. But given how they almost lost to Japan, that is, like, it's really, like, rubbing me the wrong way. Like, I don't want to put my money on them immediately because, again, I'm not entirely sure if they're going to, perform as well as I think that they should. Because, like, that performance against Japan was very, very bad. Like, it shouldn't have been anywhere near that close. It should not have been that close. And the fact that they took them an overtime quarter just to be able to beat them is a bit concerning. However, they did answer the call when they desperately needed it, and I always like to put my money on teams that can deliver in high-pressure situations. And, like, when the going gets tough, the tough get going. Like, that's really what I like to see that with teams. And the fact that they were able to hit an incredibly clutch 3-point and one to tie the game, like, it's you can't get any more clutch than that. Granted, may have been bailed out because of the ref calling the foul, but aside from that, I don't think that was a bailout. There's a lot of sports going on in the Olympics, by the way. There's track and field, there's soccer, there's fencing. Goodness me. But anyway, aside from that, that's really, like, sort of what I expect to happen, and I would put my money on France because the French team, they deliver in these high leverage games. Let me just go ahead and quickly adjust the light on this. There we go. They deliver in these high leverage games, and, like, Germany, they've seemed to blow out, like, almost every single time. Like, they've blown out every single team that they've gone up against, but then again, they've also gone up against the lowest ranking teams in their entire bracket, in their entire group. So playing against the French team, it's going to be a little bit more competitive than the rest of these teams. So maybe the fact that they haven't seen adversity yet is going to, hinder them a little bit. But that's just me. Now, next on this also, like, this game is one of the very few games that has any sort of implications on quarterfinals because they both qualified. Doesn't matter what happens. Now, the next game, however, is going to be a little bit more competitive. United States against Puerto Rico. Psych. But no, seriously, I think the United States is going to absolutely mop the floor with Puerto Rico. Like, they're just going to... That's the sound of a sweep. Like, they're just going to destroy them. The end. Kaput. Done. Next question. So, the actual game that, that really matters and that is going to affect a lot of teams is going to be the Serbian game against South Sudan. Depending on how this game ends, could really shape-shift the way that the quarterfinals is going to go. There are a multitude of different things that could end up happening based off of the results of this game. Like, there is a possibility of what happens if Serbia wins. There's a possibility of what happens if South Sudan wins. There's also a possibility of what happens if Serbia wins by this much, if Serbia loses by this much, if South Sudan wins by this much, if South Sudan loses by this much. So many stuff. It's so complicated. Like, it is very complicated, but I'm going to try to, explain it a little bit better one more time. Like, I spent so many times explaining this because, like, it is very confusing. It's very confusing. So, depending on how much South Sudan wins by. Well, actually, no, we'll go by South Sudan losing because I firmly believe that South Sudan is going to end up losing this game. So, if South Sudan ends up losing, okay? This is like a very this is a very like highly this is a high possibility. This could very well happen. Now, if they lose, they have to make sure that they lose by at the very least 2 points or at the very least 1 point. If they lose to Serbia by 1 point, then that would mean that their point differential would be -7, and their record would be exactly the same as Brazil, Australia, Spain, and Greece. But because they would still have that point differential to back them up, they would qualify. Because Australia would qualify just based off of point differential, and Brazil has already qualified, so there's really only room for about 2 more teams left if my math is correct. So you have Canada that's going to qualify, Germany that's going to qualify, United States that's going to qualify, Serbia that's going to qualify, France that's going to qualify. So that is 5 teams. And then you also had Brazil that qualifies, so that's 6. So that leaves you with 2 other teams left to possibly qualify in these games. And if South Sudan only loses by 2, then Australia and South Sudan would qualify. Right? Makes enough sense. Now, if Serbia ends up losing, then that's a whole different ball game. If Serbia ends up losing, because then South Sudan they would be 2-1, and then Serbia would be 1-2, which would mean that Serbia has the same record as Australia, Spain, Greece, and Brazil. Now, depending on whether or not Serbia loses by more than 15 points, if they just lose, then they would still qualify, because the fact that they have the same record as Australia, Brazil, Spain, and Greece is going to get canceled out because of their extremely high point differential. Their point differential is plus 15, meaning that if they would lose by anything less than 15 points, that wouldn't matter, because Australia has a -4, Spain and Greece have a -8, and Brazil have a -7. So that point differential for Serbia is going to be what propels them to make it into the next round, because they have such a high point differential. Right? Now, if they lose by more than 15 points, like, let's say they lose by, let's do some quick math here. Let's say they lose by 22 points or something like that. Then their point differential would be in the negatives, which would alter, which teams would end up in which spot. Like, that is really like the big what if scenario. Like, what if South Sudan just comes out and just immediately destroys the Serbian team? That is a very, very big what if. Very big what if. Which is, why I don't think that Serbia is going to end up losing, let alone by so many points, which is why I think that Serbia is going to end up qualifying regardless of whether or not they win or lose. But that is just the way that I think, and that is how I think that those are just my predictions. Let me know in the comments what you guys think is going to happen. But aside from that, that is all that I have for you today on this segment. Thank you so much for tuning in to the GSMC Basketball Podcast, presented by the GSMC Sports Network. Your support means a lot to us, so remember to subscribe to the show, leave a positive review. It really does make a difference. We also invite you to follow us on Facebook, Twitter, TikTok, and Instagram for more content and updates. As usual, please remember to use the link in the description to get your comments recognized, or the link displayed below the ticker on every show segment. It's gsmcpodcast.net. Really ups the show, makes it much more interactive between myself and you guys. That is all that I have for you today on the podcast. Thank you so much for tuning in. I'm Nelson, and as always, take care and have a great weekend. I'll see you all on Monday.
Let's go. I wake up to a little bit of drool on my pillow, feel like it's gonna be a bad day. Yeah, I'm tired of shit, and the coffee ain't hit yet. Damn, ain't that great. I don't wanna